What's up, guys? Welcome to Math Walkthroughs with Mr. Weeb. Let's look at square roots today. First question asks us to think about squares and rectangles. What could the square root of 600 mean? Well, I like to think visually, so maybe I'll just start by drawing a picture. A very bad picture of a square. You have to imagine that it's a square, though. I'm going to say that the area inside the square is 600 units squared. And my explanation is this. The square root of 600 could mean the side length of a square with an area of 600 square units. 2a asks, if two numbers are 10 apart, is it likely that their square roots are also 10 apart? Well, first I would like to say let's figure out two numbers that are 10 apart. So let's say 1, let's first look at 1 and 11. And here's 11 down here. Next, we need to figure out their square roots. So what's the square root of 1? It's just 1. And the square root of 11, we can estimate it. It's going to be between 3 and 4. So 3.5, approximately. So I probably shouldn't have an actual equal sign there. It's approximately 3.5 because it's somewhere between 3 and 4. So are there square roots are they also 10 apart? No, they're not. Let's think of a much larger number now, two much larger numbers that are 10 apart. So let's say we start with 100 and 110, and then figure out what are their square roots. Square root of 100 is 10. The reason I picked 100 is because it is a proper perfect square. Next, let's figure out, I'm going to use my calculator to figure out what the square root of 110 is, and it's going to be actually pretty close to 10, isn't it? It's 10.5. Let's figure out an even larger. Let's go to 1,000. You know what? Even 10,000. And 10,010. And then figure out their square roots. So the square root of 10,000 is going to be 100 because 100 times 100 is 10,000. And what is the square root of 10,010 going to be? Well, it's going to be pretty close to the square root of 10,000, isn't it? It's going to be 100.05. Now, you didn't have to use these numbers if you didn't want to, but my explanation for this would be something like this. When I looked at numbers that were 10 apart, their square roots were never 10 apart, no matter if those numbers were very small or very large. And then in part B it asks, how far apart are the square roots of numbers that are 10 apart likely to be? To answer that, I would look at some of the things I had calculated in the previous question and say that it depends on how small the numbers are. For example, the square root of 1, when we look back up here, the square root of 1 and 11 are about 2 apart, but the square root of 10,000 here and the square root of 10,010 are only about 0.05 apart. Okay, so let's move on to describe three things that we now know about square roots in general. And I might say something like this. I know that there aren't very many perfect squares compared to non-perfect squares. I know that square roots describe the side length of a square. I know that square roots are sometimes hard to find without a calculator. I know that however close together two numbers are, their square roots are probably closer together than that. I know that square roots are more likely to be decimals than whole numbers. And I know that the square root of even perfect squares are even, and square roots of odd perfect squares are odd. Let's move to the next page. Here we see a question that asks us, which number is the best estimate for the square root of 890? Do not use a calculator. Okay, this we can figure out with the process of elimination. We know when we're taking the square root of a number, in this case the square root of 890, it's going to be smaller than that because something times something is 890. It has to be smaller. So we can right away get rid of that. That's not going to be a possibility. Next, we can think about, okay, let's look at A. What's 8.9 close to? It's really close to 9, and we know that 9 times 9 is 81. Well, That's not going to get us to 890. Something smaller than 9, that's not going to get there. So let's remove that option. Next, if we multiply 400, let's take a look at this one. If we just rounded it down to 400 and we multiplied it by 400, well, 4 times 4 is 16, and then we've got 4 zeros after that. 160,000. Well, that doesn't get us to 890 at all. So we can tell just by looking and using the process of elimination that this is going to be the answer. And that makes sense because if you go 30 by 30, that gives us 900. And that brings us very close to 890. All right, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.